From Founders Financial, this is the Built by and for podcast, partner-to-partner conversations for independent financial advisors. Today, host Stephen Watts, Chief Growth Officer at Founders Financial, sits down with Brad Shepard, CEO of Founders Financial, to discuss complexity, leadership, and the CEO mindset every advisor eventually needs. Most independent advisors hit a wall, not a market wall, a complexity wall. The work of running the business slowly crowds out the work of serving clients. Here's the conversation.
All right, good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us today. I think we have a really exciting topic that's going to hit home for many of you joining us or many of you watching this. It's for many of you who are beginning to face growth challenges for the first time in your business, or maybe you've been feeling the pains of stagnant growth for a while, and you're looking for solutions to get the practice and yourself back on the right track. I think we've got an incredible topic here for you today that's really going to give you some great insights in terms of how to move forward. My name is Stephen Watts. I'm the Chief Growth Officer here at Founders Financial, and I am super pleased to be joined by a friend and colleague and mentor, Brad Shepard, our Chief Executive Officer. Thank you, Brad, for joining us. Brad has been the CEO of Founders since 2017. He served as our president prior to that. He spent close to 3 decades in the financial services industry as both an advisor, but really a leader within the organization. In addition to driving strategy for Founders, Brad is really deeply committed and focused on directly serving the members within the Founders community. He spends a large portion of his time working with advisors to help them build up their practices and achieve the dreams that they have for it. Brad, let me kind of tee this conversation up today in this way. We live in a world today where complexity and progress, they're button heads, right? They are constantly at odds with one another, right? With so many things that are designed to make the work we do simpler, to make it more efficient, to frankly just make it easier. It's the way it's often packaged and sold. A lot of advisors find themselves still saddled with the weight of everything going on around them. And it's awful. It often stifles the growth of the individual and of the practice. You and I have both spent a lot of time with advisors prior to them coming to Founders. And one thing that we almost always hear is that they are just weighed down by inefficiency. They're weighed down by urgency, and they find themselves doing a lot less of what they really enjoy doing, which is working with their client relationships. And they spend a lot more time on the things that, we might consider less value driven. Doesn't mean not important, but less value driven, less fulfilling in many ways, right? So to kind of get things going, why is the topic of complexity and its impact on growth important for advisors today, and why is it going to remain relevant for the years and time ahead?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I thank you for the very kind introduction. I am equally thrilled to be having this discussion with you today. I'm hopeful that those who have chosen to listen and kind of lean into this topic get some real benefit from our discussion and overall presentation today. So, why is this important? Because it's about impact, right? And so advisors, as they grow practices, they inevitably hit ceilings of complexity that they didn't necessarily probably plan for. And we'll talk about why that is as we go through that today. But fundamentally, it's about impact. And the more the shiny objects of our industry challenge their time, they promise efficiency, but don't necessarily deliver it. We find that advisors get to this moment where they've been successful. They are attracting relationships. They're doing a good job, all the things that our industry would measure by, but they're waking up consistently frustrated, unhappy, and not sure what to do next. And we'll talk a lot about that today. But why is it important? Because it's about the happiness of an advisor and their ability to continue to lead an organization that represents their heart and why they got into all this in the first place.
Yeah, that's a great kind of overview. So let's kind of jump right into it, right? So we know that advisors are doing a lot these days, right? They're involved in so many things they want to be involved in, some things they wish they could maybe push to the side. So let's kind of look at the numbers of it, right? So what does the average work week for an advisor look like? And how does that impact and affect their ability to quite frankly, grow their business?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Prior to me being blessed to become the CEO of Founders, I sat in the chair, so I understand what advisors do. And there's many times where I wish that this fact that we're looking at here was actually the only number of hours I worked in a week. But it's interesting. The average number of hours worked per week by an advisor is about 53. And when you break it all down, what the facts tell us is that a lot of that 53 hours is spent doing things that actually aren't about growth. They are actually not about growing client relationships, aren't about the things that frankly give advisors fulfillment and happiness as to why they started doing this in the first place, to care for relationships and help people achieve their goals and dreams. And so when you look at this, kind of this slide here, you'll see all of the myriad of things that advisors in theory have to do on any given day. And the majority of those, which are in orange, are things that aren't about growing, enhancing relationships, and growing their business. And so they're saddled with effort, work, inefficiency, that takes away their joy, candidly, takes away their ability to grow. And so the complexity of owning a business and not just being an advisor means they're wearing multiple hats often, and they're challenged every single day with what to do next. And so when you then look at the amount of time they're actually spending statistically on the things that are most impactful to their business, to growing their business, and to their own happiness and joy, about 20 hours a week is spent actually working with, developing relationships, growing their practice, because of all the other things they have to do as business owners.
Man, when you look at the context of all that, right, and 21 hours and in the course of an entire week and how that builds up over a month, it's not a lot of time, right? And
It's not, and oftentimes it's distracted time as well. So 21's a generous number probably, but even in the question there is it 21 hours of focused time or is it distracted time because of all the other things they have to do that are rummaging around their minds to live up to the promises that they've made.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, so Brett, what are some of the common challenges advisors face when they're trying to move from this and trying to balance this operating of their business to finding more time to growing and enhancing those relationships? It's tricky, right? I mean, you got to keep the business running. You got to do the things you got to do, right? But at the same, we know that growing and enhancing relationships is the key to growth, right? And it's
It is,
one of the
without question.
you have to do.
And I'll
So
say this, especially in what I'll call a saturated market. The mass affluent, which much of us serve as advisors, even the high net worth space, there's plenty of advisors to serve that, and so growth is even more challenged because the opportunity for growth is challenged. But ultimately, what does it suggest is that advisors have an incredible ceiling of complexity. And that what they struggle with is how do they allocate their time? Time is their most precious commodity. It is something they can't get back. And every minute they spend time doing one thing is a minute they can't spend time doing another thing. And so that ceiling of complexity is very challenging because, as I said a minute ago, they've got many hats they wear. They've got many promises they have to live up to. And so what we find is that the need to operate kind of overtakes the opportunity to grow. Because again, you can't not do what you've said you're going to do. And the more you have responsibility to do that as your business grows, it gets harder to find the time to grow relationships. And so what we've learned over all these years working with all the advisors that we work with is that advisors are in constant conflict. How do they allocate their time to focus on what they want to do, which is impact lives, grow relationships, help people's dreams and goals be met, versus what they kind of have to do, which is operate an enterprise, right? And so what we tend to see is those firms that are really challenged by this complexity, they become very reactive to growth. they're not proactive in things. They're kind of on their back foot all the time. And this combination of factors then it's what causes growth to stall. The things that they were ramping up with in the early days, they're no longer green lights, they're yellow and red lights because they have so much to do to simply care for the relationships that they've already been blessed to begin to serve.
Yeah, I think there's this idea of the paradox, right? The
Right.
paradox
Yeah.
of growth, and it's illustrated in books that you and I have spent some time talking about, and we've shared with other members. But this idea that growth creates complexity, right? The very nature of growth itself creates complexity, and complexity ultimately becomes that silent killer of growth. And it's the recognition of complexity and how it's forming in your business, which is really one of the first steps you have to take. And I'll tee this next thing up for you because I think it's something that you're very passionate about. But what if?
Yeah.
I'll turn it over to you.
No doubt. Yeah. Imagine for those of you that are listening today, imagine if you could spend 60, 70, who knows, maybe even 80% of your time doing what you love, the reason you started to do this in the first place, growing and enhancing relationships. And that previous comment about growth creates complexity and complexity is the killer of growth. It is this wicked cycle that advisors find themselves in. And that's ultimately because they're not just advisors, and understanding that. And that's what we're here to talk about today, is really, really important to break through those challenges.
Yeah, so all the next stuff I want to get into on this discussion today is how do we unlock that? How do we go from the 21 hours, right, to getting closer to this 50, 60, 70% threshold where you can really focus on the thing that matters most, which is your client relationships and growing and nurturing them into new ones. So I'll tell you this next thing. So why is this predictable, right?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And this is the crux of the conversation today. I promise you, any advisor who's getting going, running and building their own independent practice is going to arrive at this moment. It is completely predictable. And the reason it's predictable is because advisors are excellent technicians of planning, investment management, and their expertise as technicians ultimately does attract enough client opportunities, enough relationships, enough business opportunities, and their ability to then lead those relationships creates an environment where they continue to have more and more and more to do, more responsibility and obligation to live up to as they're now making this positive impact in the lives of those they serve. But the reason it's predictable is because I believe, and maybe this is unfair, but I just believe that most independent advisors became independent because they wanted to serve clients' goals and dreams more objectively, more effectively. They wanted to not be constrained by a product mix or a platform mix or a technology need or whatever. And they wanted to do a great job of helping people in that way. But the outcome of that, I do believe, is that most independent advisors are kind of, and I'll say it this way, kind of accidental business owners. They didn't wake up like, oh, I want to go be a business owner. And oh, yeah, I want to be the business owner in financial services. They arrive at a place where because they've chosen the independent path, they have to be a business owner. And this clashing of responsibility, what it is to own a business versus what it is to operate a business, crash into each other all the time. And so this complexity that we're talking about is utterly predictable and hits with advisors that are probably, the first time it hits we see is they're doing 2, 3, 400,000 at GDC. Their clients and households they're serving have grown above 100 or 200. And all of a sudden they're going, wait a second, I don't have enough hours to grow anymore because I literally spend every waking hour taking care of those promises I've made.
Yeah, it's funny. I wonder how many advisors have thought about it like that they became accidental business owners. Because I think probably different than other entrepreneurs, right? Where the entrepreneur might have a business they wanted to start, they wanted to be an entrepreneur, they wanted to open up a bakery or a restaurant or a
Right.
store, right? So they start out that way. Advisors are probably a little different, right? They wanted to serve clients, but they had to build a business around that.
Right.
And that they maybe weren't as prepared for the complexity that is going to come naturally through that evolution, through that process. So it's interesting in the way to think about it. It's not negative, it's just the reality of the
Yeah.
situation.
And I'll say this way. I'm hopeful that those that are listening aren't offended by that statement at all. It's not intended to be that way. It's just the experience. It wasn't the primary reason to go independent. It's the outcome of going independent. And what we see often is firms that are struggling for growth, dealing with complexity. It's this crashing together of the needs of what it is to run a business versus operate as an advisor in a business.
Yeah.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah. So, yeah, let's get to the punchline, right?
Yeah.
What is the solution? And I don't think I'm going to say anything revolutionary here, but I do think I'm going to say something probably hasn't been said a whole lot. And that is, I fundamentally believe that advisors to break through this complexity, set the road right, is they have to become the CEO of their enterprise. They kind of have to, Steve, they have to kind of unlock their inner CEO. And the shift that takes place when that happens is, I think, well described here. It's the idea that their most important responsibility is to lead, is to empower, is to engage, and is to pursue growth. And that, and kind of in contrast to what I think most advisors who are dealing with this stuff are doing, which is managing, doing it themselves, reacting to the things around them, markets, clients' needs, all that kind of stuff, and kind of existing and struggling with and not really knowing what to do because they've been trained as advisors, great advisors, but they've not spent time kind of in the school of business, understand how can they make change, the kind of changes that a more strategic thought process would bring to the table that CEOs tend to focus on.
Yeah, Brad, let me jump in for a second because I want to throw this back at you. I think naturally when people think about growing their business, it's really easy to look at the stuff they need, right? I need more capital. I need this new marketing automation tool. I need these things, right? Because they're going to help me grow, right? But really what we're saying here is what you're saying is it's a mindset shift, right? It's the way you think differently. That is the most important stuff. That other stuff is important in its own context, but thinking differently and thinking like a CEO and being cognizant of the things that are weighing you down, that is the first initial big step that if you really want to grow, you have to cross that barrier. Does that sound right?
I would say that's right. I would also add to that, it's what and how you allocate your time. Right, back to the earlier point of the discussion today, time is that precious commodity we only have a finite amount of. And so it's also the allocation of time so you have the space to do what you've just described and do the work of a CEO and think differently and push your boundaries a little bit there. And so yeah, and so why is this so important? It's so important because if you don't do this, in my opinion, you will be stuck. You will be stagnant. You will be trapped in this web of complexity that it gets really hard to unravel. And our industry will promote to you that the solution is the next technology, the next this, the next that, and it really isn't. Those are the commodities. And so, why is this so important? Because if you can't understand that your role is to lead something versus do something, you're kind of missing the boat. The impact of commoditization in our industry is profound. Investment models, technology, the shop that you're competing against down the street has kind of the same tools that you do. Financial planning as an art is still alive, but the science of how you deliver it with planning software, how you trading software platforms, how you custody, there's only so many choices. And so that commoditization, which is really healthy for our industry, actually, because it means that those that are going to spend this time properly, think about how to grow strategically, about how to change and build, they can leverage that the commoditization of the tools powerfully to create a mechanism in their organization that will drive growth ultimately. And so it's also important because it's about mindset, as you were talking about earlier, about inspirational stuff, right? The inspiration of growth. And what does it mean? At Founders here, what we promote to our advisors, our member partners, is that growth isn't about AUM and GDC. It's about the impact, the growth of impact in the people's lives. And as you do that and you unlock those chains a little bit, it's incredible the testimony that comes back and how they become ambassadors to your organization. Just it's advisor passion. I can't tell you, Steve, how many advisors I speak to in the course of a year over the last 10 where they're just tired. There's so much to do, and they've lost their joy a little bit. And so why is it so important to this CEO mindset? Because it's just going to help them get their passion back. And I've watched it happen. And that passion then directly leads to this idea of protecting from decay. Again, it's about stagnation or growth. If you're not growing, you are decaying. And that's just a fact. No one says it like that, but it's the truth. And so this passionate inspiration to grow begins and then think differently as a CEO drives the ability to kind of protect from the emotion of decay that takes place as you feel overwhelmed by things. And then, my favorite 2 points, why is this so important for advisors to begin to consider what it means to be the CEO, not just the advisor, is these last 2 points. It just renders everything better, renders everything easier. The most effective practices are the ones that have built the right systems with the right people to support growth and unlock the passion of a leader now to make everybody's world better. And then it's the gift of time, as we opened with, hours and hours get spent in the kind of, I'll say, the more mundane of our work, the important work, but the more mundane versus the growth focused work of impacting lives. And it's just a super important topic we're talking about today.
Yeah, I think the thing that always sticks out to me in conversations that we've had, and I know we've had with other of our members and advisors, is this idea that growth isn't just an economic quotient, right? Yes, we all want to grow our businesses to make them more valuable and gain in those economic areas, right? But growth is more to it, right? And really that mindset shift, right, is important, right? Because it gives you new perspective on things, gives you new perspective of what growth looks like, and that helps you get through some of those tough times of growth, right? Where maybe you're not seeing the financial growth right away, but the business is growing. The stakeholders are growing, right? Your passion for the business is growing, right? And eventually those things stack up and they lead to the economic growth because you start doing things the right way for the right reasons.
Yeah, exactly. Well said. Yeah, no, I think, and certainly the advisors that I've come to know the best in this industry are the ones that don't focus on growth for growth's sake. They focus on growth for impact's sake. And so, this idea then is what's the outcome? Making this shift from manager to leader. To us, it's actually a process you can follow, and it starts with documenting, considering, assessing, and writing the guiding principles of your firm, of what you do and how and why you exist. What the outcome of that then leads to, if we go kind of clockwise around this circle here, once you've got resolute guiding principles of what your firm is all about, you then have a perspective to then build the right rituals, the right processes, the order, kind of I'll call it the factory a little bit, and the things that will make you successful, that are the rinse and repeat things, so that you can drive intentional outcomes and objectives. And this process of guiding principles to process and order to intentional outcomes. Intentional is a really important word. Again, that means you're out of the reactive mode. You're into a more thoughtful, proactive way to think about where you are and what's important. And then the outcome of that is for you, for your people, for your client relationships. It's this idea of infinite rewards through discovery, which then all of that wraps around your ability as an advisor to now own and have an authentic relationship with the people that you're blessed to serve. And so this shift from manager, advisor to leader is critical. And so the question that I ask advisors all the time as we're exploring common ground with them at Founders and helping them understand why Founders as a partner might be a little bit different than the the utility partner they're probably connected to, is this incredibly important question. And that is, can they evidence that their leadership efforts, not their advisor efforts, not their build better technology efforts, those kinds of things, but their leadership efforts as the CEO of their enterprise, are they impactful? Are they measurable? And are they felt by those under their care? And if the answer is yes, as I'll show you at the end, that points to a certain competency in their practice in what it is to own and run a purpose-rich, servant-led financial planning enterprise, and not just being an advisor to a client who needs help.
Brad, I'm going to do a shameless plug here for everyone. We've got at Founders the Strategic Enterprise Program, right? Which
Right.
really encapsulates everything you just talked about. That circle as you went around it. That's the biggest thing I see advisors when they come to Founders is they start in this area where all these things we're talking about, complexity and thinking about growth, maybe in the not most productive way. All these things are weighing them down, and they get into strategic enterprise. And the way they think begins to transform. It begins to change, right? So we've just seen incredible results, right? Not just anecdotal, but in terms of actually businesses growing as a result of the advisors who get into strategic enterprise and how that's allowed them to really just grow their business in a way they've never seen before. And so again, shameless plug, strategic enterprise, I think, is one of the biggest benefits that we see in advisors. And we've just seen it work so many times. So I just wanted to throw that out there because you're talking about it. And this is one thing at Founders we've really focused on because we know this works. And if people start thinking like this, whether it's through Founders or another firm, if they start thinking this way, this is going to set them up on the right growth path.
Without question. Yeah, without question. The bottom line is the outcome of this effort to be the CEO, not just the advisor in the practice, is you work on it and you actually build a practice that truly represents your heart and is a true representation of what you believe is most important to serve a relationship.
All right, Brad. One thing that we see in all the top performing advisors, and I've seen a bunch, you've seen a lot more, right? Is they all have their own unique rituals, right? They all have super clear process. These are the people who are really performing at a super high level, right? And they've all had this overall sense of calmness and order, right? It's almost a little bit eerie how calm they are in the most tense situations, right? So can you elaborate more on the guiding principles for working on your business and why these pieces I just mentioned are such an important part of that process?
Yeah, no, it's an excellent kind of next step, right? So why do this? Why spend time working on your enterprise versus in your enterprise? Why make the effort to allocate time this way? Hopefully we've just created a pretty compelling perspective on another way to think about it. But my seeing advisors do this, there's 8 notable impacts that I've seen in their practices where that they can attribute back to now being an effective CEO versus being an effective advisor, if that makes sense. So yeah, let's take a few minutes and go through that. So the first is it gets back to this idea of balance, harmony, happiness. And this isn't just true for an advisor. I mean, it's true for anybody in their life, right? But what I see is advisors that begin to think strategically like a CEO, is they begin to consider now their human quotient in all of this, their heart, their soul, and it brings to them a work-life balance that's gotten out of whack a little bit because they're now running an enterprise. They're delegating responsibility. They're empowering leadership of others. They're properly engaged in investing in their business the right way. And what it brings back to them then is a work-life balance that frankly, in many ways, the lack of it was driving some of the complexity, driving some of the unhappiness, all those kinds of things. And so the first impact of being a really great CEO is you begin to get work-life balance back because you're thinking about things differently and you're investing in things differently and you're running things differently. Next is profound, and it's understanding what it is to focus as a leader versus an advisor. And it's a different mindset. And so this impact of a CEO mindset is understand that CEOs are leaders of things. And the outcome of thinking as a leader, not as a doer, not as an advisor, is powerful then, and how it allows you to focus on, really considering the problems differently, and then building solutions differently, because now you're seen not just as an advisor to a client, a leader of a client relationship, but you're leader of an organization, and the dynamics of relationships shift because of that. What do good CEOs do? They've thought about structure the right way. And so as they continue to drive the leadership mindset, part of the outcome of that is assessing, is their business operating effectively? And good CEOs build great structure into their businesses, which then drive efficiency, workflow, process, rinse and repeat. We can count on things being done the right way all the time. And so great CEOs, the impact of that commitment to that work is what we find is advisory practices become much more effective and efficient because they've got the right mix of people, technology, workflow, process, and structure to support the relationships that organization serves.
Yeah, I mean, without a good foundation and good structure, I mean, that is the chaos in many ways that's being bred, right? It's just you can't. It's like the old adage, right? A good house starts with a great foundation, right? So you've got to have that foundation in a good spot.
And if you think about it this way, and it's a good segue here. It's about seeing the big picture, right? So I think CEOs tend to be top-down thinkers, whereas untrained business leaders tend to be bottom-up thinkers. I've got the problem. How do I solve it? Once it's solved, I'm good. Versus the more strategic thinker that sees the big picture of kind of how the problem arises in the first place, if that makes sense. And so the impact of being a great CEO is shifting from this bottoms up, solve the problem, reactive approach to things to more strategic, see the big picture, top down thinking. And it's the marriage of those two that really make great advisory practice. And it's interesting, if you think about the whole point of financial planning, the work that great advisors do every single day is about seeing the big picture on behalf of their client relationship. But just like I guess cardiologists don't always take their own advice about heart health, advisors don't always take their own advice about how to see the big picture the right way. And the time they can spend thinking about their big picture of their organization and operation is powerful in the context of making the necessary change investments and all that in people, process, technology that will drive the outcome and make the need for bottoms-up thinking, less important because the stuff just works because you've thought about through the right lens. You've seen the big picture the right way. That then moves to this really important point: continuity and sustainability. If you've built the mechanism the right way, you can count on it to continue to work. Doesn't mean you're not going to need to tweak it. Doesn't mean you're not going to need to continue to enhance it, tweak it here and there. But the stability of this, seeing the big picture the right way, building your process the right way, means that you, your team, and your clients have something to really count on that's sustainable and drives continuity, such that your team and relationships always know that what's been promised will be delivered and be delivered with excellence, which is an important point.
Yeah, maybe a side point on this is this seems super relevant and super important in the context of succession, right? And the idea of your practice and getting maximum valuation for it and all that. This seems really important. All of it's important in that regard, but this stands out to me as, look, I mean, it's only going to help you when you get to that point in time when you're moving from a growth minded standpoint to more of a succession, and
Sure.
got to have this stuff in place.
Without a doubt. There's certainly more value to a business where when the new owner steps in, the client relationship continues to be served in the same manner with the same care. That's a more valuable enterprise than one that's not got this, for sure. Yeah, and so then as this business is now getting more consistent, sustainable, All of these things are driving the outcome that the CEO's thought about. What does the CEO now have more time to go do? Cultivate, I think, what is the most important thing, and that's the culture of this organization. Helping to make sure that there's an ownership mindset in its team, that they're focused, this team and this business is now focused on its mission, its core values of leadership, and is able to articulate effectively to its client relationships so that they become raving ambassadors of the work that's being done on their behalf. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, as we kind of said earlier, the shiny objects, all the firms, we've got it. And so the planning software, the investment strategy, those kinds of things are kind of commodities. And so what differentiates an advisor in the marketplace today isn't those things. That's table stakes. It really is, how do you cultivate culture, and how do the people you serve feel what you do for them every single day, not just experience it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and culture is something you got to live, right? It's something you got to live every single day. It's not like your mission statement's super important, right? But if you're not living it, it's just words on a paper, right? So it's something that it needs to be driven into your team, right? It needs to be practiced in your team. It needs to be evidenced in your own actions that other people can follow. That's part of being a good leader, and that's how great cultures are developed. We always hear people complain about the culture isn't what they said it was, right? Well, that's because it's generally not lived each and every day, and every single action, every single moment, very intentionally, very purposefully. So thinking that way and living that culture, cultivating it throughout all your team, it's going to have transformative effects. It's going to have long-lasting impact for advisors as they progress through their careers, through their tenure.
Yeah, without question. I mean, the bottom line is this: great CEOs build and cultivate and lead great cultures. People are bought in. Therefore, their effort, their energy, their passion comes out, and those that are served by that organization, they feel the heart of the people, driven by the mission of the organization that's been created by the CE. Again, the impact of being a great CEO, cultivating culture in the company. Yeah, we just kind of just said that, right? So then what the outcome of that is, stakeholders grow. Their passion, who they are comes out more, and that is directly then impactful to the client relationships that are served by that organization. Said differently, the CEO, the great CEOs, help stakeholders become stewards. Stewardship becomes a great theme of the work that's done. Yeah, there's still practical, tactical technicians work that has to be done. We still got to make sure income's paid. We still have to assess, can we fund college? Can we protect families if someone were to die prematurely? All these things. But this leadership quotient under the CEOs, the great CEOs care of growing stakeholders, that becoming an important focus for that CEO, that advisor who's taken on the challenge of growing their ability to lead, is then felt and rewarded tenfold, 20-fold, infinitely, because the care of the stakeholders of the organization come full force. And then why are we on the call today? We're on the call today because we want to talk about growth. And so the ultimate impact of being a great CEO is growth. And I would say, yes, it's the growth of AUM, GDC, revenues, profits, all the things that everyone wants to focus on. But actually, to me, it's much more intangible than that. It's the growth of spirit. It's the growth of relationship. It's the growth of an organization's reputation. It's the growth of the principles that this organization stands for. And so growth under great CEOs gets measured in lots of ways, not just economically. And the outcome of the right-minded CEO's growth, it's just a beautiful thing to see the growth of people, relationships, and impact. The outcome of which ultimately then is the growth of the economic factor as well.
Right. So I'm going to throw you a curveball then on this. Then we didn't talk about this ahead of time. So you're a CEO, right? You've been in this position now for a long time. How have you seen your own personal growth from 1997, right, to 2017 to 2025? Like, give me in a short summary where your growth has what's that path look like for you?
Yeah, no, thank you for the curveball, by the way. But Yeah, no, when I was named CEO by our chairman and founder, Michael Brooks, I made the decision to go interview other great CEOs I had a lot of respect for. It was the first month or two on the job. That was my action. I hadn't been the CEO of something before. And what I heard in spades was that if you stay focused on growing the spirit of the organization, its people, you think properly and build the right plan around the strategy of the business, then empower people to lead the technical, tactical aspects of the business. But you maintain focus on the spirit, um, you will succeed. And so I think, that's been my focus over the last, almost 8 years now. How do we help people feel empowered? How do we help our people here that work at Founders feel like they're CEOs of their own areas and have the same opportunity for growth that I've had? And I'll just tell you that as I sit here today, blessed to be on this call with you, on this webinar with you, what I feel is an incredible sense of balance, harmony, and happiness, as I've been empowered to unlock and work through the complexities of what it is to build a partner practice, a partner business to great financial advisors. And so that's been my experience as CEO. There's obviously things that we got to consider, capital and markets and risk and all that kind of stuff, which we do intelligently. That's part of a strategic vision plan. But ultimately, the blessings of my journey so far have been I'm in balance, personally, because I know that we're in balance because we're tackling this thing the right way.
Yeah, one thing I'm gonna hone in on there real quick is you ask for advice, and I think that's often a misnomer that CEOs know everything, right? Or they should know everything is maybe a better way to put it. CEOs are often the best listeners, right? They're the best people who are able to digest all the information coming at them, and they seek out great advice. They seek out mentorship from other people because they just want to collect all this wealth of not just knowledge but wisdom, which are two very different things. So I think it's a great point you called out there. I didn't want to let that slip past everyone. The seeking of advice, the humbleness to do that as a CEO of your practice or your business, that is a critical element that I think is super important for all advisors.
I'll also just say to that point, and then we can move on, that great CEOs understand that nobody works for them and that they work for everybody else. It's kind of an inverted leadership model concept, a servant leadership model concept. And so as advisors are considering what it means to be the CEO of their enterprise, not just an advisor in their enterprise, I would encourage you to think about that as well. Understand that while everybody might report to you as a manager, you actually are the key in the sense that you work for them, and your efforts, your intellect, your energy, your passion, your spirit will drive so much. And the more you empower them to let them lead you, I think you'll be wonderfully surprised by the outcomes of that. And so then, to kind of summarize this part of our discussion today, what's the ultimate outcome of being a great CEO? It just renders everything easier. And I'll leave it at that and invite anybody who's listening today, if you want to have that conversation more in spades, please reach out to us and we'd be happy to have that conversation with you. I love this quote from Hebrews. It says, "No discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful. Later on, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who've been trained by it." And that's, to me, the ultimate way to summarize what the commitment to being a great CEO is. It takes a discipline. It takes a shift of mindset. It takes a reorganization of time and a commitment to doing the things that CEOs need to do. But I promise you that while it feels uncomfortable, maybe even a bit painful, that ultimately what the outcome is a production of an organization that truly represents your heart, your spirit, and brings then to that advisor a sense of peace. It's what we're all fighting for, I think. All right. So this is kind of, I think, a really key important point. So then what's the outcome of that? What we find, Steve, and you know this very, very well, is that most of the advisors we talk to, small independent planning shops, 1, 2, 3 person shops, the businesses are advisor centric. everything's built around the knowledge, the skills, the relationships of the advisor, and everybody kind of reacts to that. And so so what evolves then over time is that gets difficult. And so the practice moves into more of a client-centric model, where now we've got some process baked in because we can't keep doing things one-off, custom for everybody, focused on the advisor as the center of everything. And so we begin to build as an owner of a business some process, but everything's customized to the client outcome. And it doesn't consider then that is impossible to manage and lead ultimately, because you've basically got, you got 100 clients, you got 100 different processes, 100 different promises, 100 different commitments. And so what we find is that as advisors take up the challenge of working as a CEO, that these wonderful small independent advisory practices become process centric. The approach to each client is personalized in many ways, but it's also standardized, so that the advice they feel is all about them, but the work to get that done has scale and perspective to it that drives efficiency, profitability, and impact, most importantly. And so this transition from an advisor-centric model to a client-centric model, which is the natural first step. The only way someone gets past that is working, I think, as the CEO, and then building a process-centric organization that then can be personalized, customized to each client relationship, but it's got a standard impact to the team and how things are done. And so what we see then is that those that don't take up this challenge, they lack this kind of, we'll call it, a CEO operating system. They just never realize their full potential. That's just the truth. And by that, I mean the impact in people's lives and the ability to grow an organization. And what they get ultimately is a bunch of stuff they don't like. They get undocumented steps, underdeveloped people, employees, advisors, owners, leaders. They've got reduced capability, candidly. Because they're just stuck all the time. They can't actually go benefit from the things they've tried to put in place because they don't have time to learn how to do it, and they don't have the mindset to scale it the right way. And so they just lack the technology, the systems, the processes. Those capabilities are reduced because they've not thought about the right way, which then can, as I said at the very beginning here, they just never realize their potential. And so there's lives that aren't impacted, and there's people that don't get served completely and thoroughly by the organization because they're chasing their tails all the time.
Yeah, I think there's probably a bunch of you listening to this right now who can look at those 6 bullet points sit over there and find a bunch of them that probably you're experiencing right now, right? And that's why you're on this call. That's why you're on this webinar. You're listening. You're thinking about these things because one of these 6 or many of these 6 fit your world today. So and you're not alone.
Not at all. It is a common theme of independent advisor.
So Brad, before we wrap up, I think there's one question that you and I seemingly always, when we talk to advisors, we always seem to throw back at them, right, in a nice way. We kind of give them this question to really get them to think hard about their role as a CEO and their role as a leader. I'm going to let you tee it up for the audience today.
Yeah, no, thank you. So here's the point. And if there's any moment where I'm going to really kind of push you to think hard, and that's this question. Given everything you know of yourself, your organization, etc., your strengths, your weaknesses, would you hire yourself as the CEO of your enterprise? Or would you just stay as an advisor in your enterprise, the lead advisor in your enterprise? And only you can answer that. I can tell you that those that, if you go back a slide for me, please, Steve, those that answer this question, yes, they'd hire themselves and they commit to doing the work of being a CEO, a great CEO. Those organizations, they're fundamentally different than those that are comfortable just remaining in that role of lead advisor. And so, when you think then about your organization and what you aspire to in growth and impact, I would really challenge you to take up this question. And if the answer is yes, don't just say yes and be good. Ask why. And if your answer is no, what's missing? And really dig deep in all that. And of course, we'd be more than happy to help you, navigate that question as well. If you're interested in some time with myself or people here, founders, that we spend a lot of time helping advisors think about this question.
Yeah, and an honest no is a good thing, right? Because it's a recognition of where you are. So for everyone listening, if you say no to this, that's not a bad thing. It just means you're understanding where you are, and you're now primed and ready to take the next step. So next time you ask yourself that question, it can be a heck yes, right? That's the goal.
Right. Yeah, well said.
Right.
Again, it's the difference between being the leader of something versus an advisor to something. And that's a fundamental difference that many don't understand perfectly. And that's why this question, you take this question up, you get to go explore that pretty aggressively. So before we kind of, talk about wanting to connect, I would just say this, that as an owner of an independent advisory practice, good on you. What a remarkable choice you've made to serve and care. It's an incredible, noble profession we serve and live in. The people that we get to touch, someday they're gonna have nothing but testimony about the incredible work you did to help them retire, protect their families, educate their children, all that kind of stuff. And so, I challenge you to take up this idea. What does it take to be the CEO versus just the advisor in it? And we certainly stand ready to have that conversation with you. I think what makes Founders special, Steve, is we understand that our job is to be a partner to that conversation versus just be a utility to an advisor to maybe help them do the work of advising better, if that makes sense. And the outcome for our member partners is much richer businesses. I don't mean economically, just richer businesses about what they do, how they serve, and then the growth that we've seen. There's a reason why we're one of the faster growing organizations out there, because it's the work we put in helping them think about this stuff.
Yeah, well said. Brad, great job today and great discussion. Thank you for letting me kind of lead it with you and let me participate. I hope everyone listening has gotten a lot from this. But in the meantime, thank you all again for coming. Have a great rest of your week, and we look forward to seeing and talking to each of you again here soon. Thanks.
Yep. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks for spending time with us on the Built by and for podcast. If this conversation resonated, follow the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube, and share it with an advisor in your circle who's thinking about what comes next. To learn more about Founders Financial and our solutions for independent advisors, visit foundersfinancial.com. The Built by and for podcast is produced by Founders Financial. The opinions expressed by hosts and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of Founders Financial. Content is for informational purposes only and is not intended as investment, legal, or tax advice. Securities offered through Founders Financial Securities, LLC, member FINRA and SIPC, registered investment advisor. Copyright Founders Financial, all rights reserved.